Jupiter Broadcasting presents this program in stereo. This episode brought to you in part by GoDaddy.com.
And welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 17, Episode 9. My name is Chris, and joining me on the Skype line is Alan. Hey there, Alan. How are you?
Hey, Chris.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for filling in for Brian for one more week.
No problem.
Yeah, Brian's out this week, but he'll be joining us again next week. We've got a massive show lined up. We've decided probably one of the number one requests I've gotten over the last 3 or 4 months is, can you talk about Linux Media Centers? And even though we've done that a little bit in the show in the past, it seemed like now is a good time to sort of revisit this. One, we're going to start this week with Xbox Media Center, XBMC, because there is a Jupiter Broadcasting plugin out there, which is awesome. So we're going to talk about that. But I figured we'd kick off a series of different Linux Media Center software packages, and we'll get a little more esoteric as we go. So we're going to kind of start out with the fundamental, well-known, established players, and then we're going to kind of reach out from there, probably wrap up the season with this. And I want to leave a little bit of room in here for you guys to send in your suggestions. Maybe we can crowdsource some solutions to problems people are having out there, like surround sound playback issues or Blu-ray playback issues, and maybe we can come up with some group solutions for the whole audience and maybe fix some of my own problems while we're at it. What do you think, Alan? It's going to be a good show, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, before we go, I want to give a holler over to Roku. The new Roku box, the Roku 2 XS, runs Linux. I didn't do a Linux pick last week because we're doing the Summer Express edition, so I wanted to give a shout-out to a really cool new little Linux device this week to make up from skipping it last week. If you're not familiar with the Roku, I have a link to the Amazon page in our show notes. The Roku is a sweet little media center in a box, so it fits in perfectly with this week's episode and theme. It's sort of like, I guess, the turnkey solution that does a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. It's, what, I don't know, 10% of what Xbox Media Center could actually do?
Something like that. But basically, it's if you don't want to mess with anything, then you can just buy this.
It's a total turnkey solution.
If you want to be a real man, if you want to be a real geek, then you're going to build something yourself.
If you want to be a real man, yeah. So we're gonna get manly later on in this episode.
Yes.
But before we jump into that, I want to say holler to our buddies over at GoDaddy.com. Now, GoDaddy.com is known for domain name registration, of course. Everybody knows you can go register your domain name over there, but one of the things I think people often don't think about, and GoDaddy is the perfect solution for this, is one of these scenarios where you're ready to set up a project, you're ready to get going, and you need to get some hosting fast. Well, GoDaddy has actually some pretty great hosting offers, and to be completely fair, we've used networks of GoDaddy servers to distribute our content and mirror them. They're extremely reliable, very well priced. Check this out. If you use the code Linux20 when you check out, you can save 20% off your shared hosting plans. And go check out GoDaddy's shared hosting. It actually looks pretty good. For example, for $5 a month, right? So less than a trip to the Starbucks, you can get unlimited bandwidth, 100 email accounts, 10 MySQL databases. Now, the nice thing about the unlimited bandwidth is that right there was the key factor that made this really easy for us to make it a part of our mirrored solution. We were to roll our own system. For this price, you cannot beat that. You cannot beat bandwidth prices at $5 a month for all you can eat. Even if all it does is host files and nothing else, you cannot beat that. So it works great for that, and that's $5 a month, and if you use the code Linux20, you save 20%. If you're getting anything else at GoDaddy, use our code Linux, and you'll save 10% at checkout, and thanks to GoDaddy. They are, of course, the number one place to get your domain names, and now you're hosting too. Right, Alan?
Yes.
There you have it.
After you buy that domain name, it doesn't do anything unless you get hosting.
Yeah, it's got to go somewhere.
People
and the
buy
other
that
thing,
and be like, so what did I buy now? Well,
right.
It doesn't do anything.
Yeah, and like, or if you want to throw up like a test site and show someone like, look what we could do as a project for you. You don't really want to go drop a bunch of money on a bunch of hosting where you get even like a big bandwidth spike and you get dinged on from both ends at that point. So I always love this. It's a great way to get rolling, and go check it out. Links in the show notes, of course. Now this week, Alan, my Android pick is sort of more in the spirit of a casual Linux action show, and it is a game. I haven't done a game for weeks. I think the last game I did was Pew Pew, which was towards the beginning of last season almost. I don't remember. Now this week, on my Samsung Galaxy tab here, I have a new game called Switch. And Switch is a really fun, fast-paced Rails shooter. You jump around between these tracks, and you avoid colliding with obstacles, and of course it's free too, so it's a great little time killer.
It reminds me of AudioSurf.
Yeah. Somebody else had mentioned that in the chat room. I've never seen AudioSurf, but somebody else in the chat room when I was talking about this said reminded them of AudioSurf.
Well,
so I should
think
look
that
that up.
AudioSurf would be a hybrid of this and Guitar Hero, because the AudioSurf, the blocks are determined by the music, and you're trying to either hit them or avoid them.
That sounds pretty fun. Now I've got it here on my Samsung Galaxy Tab, and it is a great little gaming experience on the Galaxy Tab. It's the perfect.
Yeah,
first of all, the Tab is a great pocket machine, and this is a great pocket game. And you just bust this thing out, and it almost makes you look forward to like downtime, so you have a little something to do. And it's a real good test of your reflexes because it gets faster and faster and faster, and you have to keep looking ahead and planning. It's a good little brain teaser as well. It's more than you'd expect, and it's free, and you can get it in a link in the show notes. And that again is Switch. And of course, you can try searching the Android marketplace, but I will be honest with you, I had very little luck searching. It's like a 4 or 5 star rated app, tons of good reviews, tons of downloads, a good solid developer. But I searched the Android marketplace for Switch, and I get a bunch of widgets. I get everything but this game. So direct link in the show notes.
Kind of a generic term to have as a name.
Yeah, it is, right? It's like their SEO for the marketplace. I don't know if I guess the marketplace must have some sort of SEO equivalent, just isn't that good.
It's hard to get a word that actually has other meanings, right?
But the only gripe I have about this game is you can see if you're watching the video version, extremely poor ad placement. And it just got this the little ad box shows up in the middle bottom of the screen.
It looks like they just used like the standard Google.
Yep. And you don't actually have any, there's no need to tap in that spot because you're going from side to side, so you tap on the edges of the screen, but it's still kind of obnoxious.
Yeah.
And it does work on Honeycomb too, so if you've got a tablet, you get the nice full gaming experience, right? So that's Switch. Go check it out. Link in the show notes, and then let me know what you think, and enjoy it. And it's got good sound too. So I'm really impressed with it. It's by a company called Playbox, and I guess they're known for making a few other things out there as well. Yeah? Cool. All right, Alan. Let's do the news. All right, Alan, the top story on the news docket for this week. Linux kernel version 3.0 has been released.
There we go. After a small delay.
Yeah, after a small delay, because there was, a little minor bug in it.
Yeah, they found a path with something, or a bug with something to do with pathing, and they got the patch in, and it was all good, but they had only patched it a couple hours before it was supposed to come out, so they decided it was better to delay it and do a little more testing.
Does this release kind of feel like a... I don't know, just Linus basically said,
It's arbitrary. We're just deciding that this is 3.0.
It's been a long time. The numbers are getting high. It's Linux's 20th birthday. Let's just do a 3.0.
Right, and that kind of defeats the whole point of major and minor version numbers, but
he said they were waiting for some major thing to come along where they'd have to reinvent some portion of code that would cause breakage. And they said that we were just getting so far along, and we just weren't having that issue. And so we just decided to call it. What do you think of that? You think that's a bad sign, or is that a good sign?
No. Mozilla Thunderbird randomly jumped from 3.1 to 5.0.
Yeah. Yeah, version numbers are kind of...
well, they did that because they synced their version numbers with Gecko, their rendering engine.
To be honest with you, I care.
That's the same. I think that's the same reason why Firefox jumped to 5.0 so quickly.
Yeah.
Why they didn't just call it 4.1 or whatever. It's just they decided to sync all their version numbers with their back-end library.
I just don't care about the version number anymore. But it is kind of interesting what did make it into 3.0. I don't even really pay attention to what version of kernel I have anymore as long as it supports everything I want. But it actually is a pretty decent release, and I'm kind of glad it's not that ground shaking, because then it means we're going to get it in the next distro releases. They're not going to have to hold off and wait. And one of the things that's in there is, and this is kind of funny, support for the Microsoft Connect. Connect drivers made it into the kernel, which is kind of awesome. Also, support for the Apple iSight. And I'm not actually sure how that works, since my understanding is the Apple iSight requires a piece of proprietary firmware that has to be uploaded to the iSight camera upon activation or something like that. I don't know exactly, but how much do you want... Okay, a little bit, right? Come on, people. You got a little bit want to interact with your Linux desktop using Connect, right? Isn't that a little bit? Don't you kind of want to do that? I know Microsoft invented the technology and everything like that, but that's, what if you just like sitting back in your chair and you could like put your hand out and, like swipe to turn the page, but instead you're just swiping in the air and just swipe through the air. Swipe through the air.
Well, remember as an April Fool's joke, Google came out with that set of hand gestures to operate Gmail.
Yeah.
And then somebody went and actually made it. Right?
It's like, how do you get to Minority Report style interfaces through these kinds of things? Yeah, and it's funny.
Like, it's funny better than Minority Report. You don't have to touch the screen to get fingerprints on it.
Right. And it's funny that Microsoft Connect support is built into Linux kernel 3.0 before it ships with support in the Windows operating system. Just like we had USB 3.0 way before everybody else. Now even their own hardware support, it's in the Linux kernel.
This comes back to a very old Windows Linux joke.
Yeah.
Right? Windows' tagline used to be, "Where do you want to go today?"
Right.
And so the joke was that Linux's is, "Where do you want to go tomorrow?"
Right. Very true.
And because they're ahead, right?
Yeah.
But then BSD's was, "Are you guys coming or what?" Because we were already there.
Yeah. You had to get the BSD love. And for those of you who don't know, Alan is a big BSD guy. In fact, if you haven't watched our TechSnap show, Alan and I, we do a show called TechSnap. And in fact, we're actively soliciting submissions for IT questions, any tech question really, for next week's episode. So send those into techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Alan, you put a little blurb in the show note, and I think we should make this our new tagline. Alan and I charge a lot of money per hour to answer the questions that we are now answering for free on TechSnap. So send in your tech questions, and we will answer them.
We will save you a lot of money.
When you said that, I thought, you figure every hour, every show of TechSnap, we've went and last
at least
too.
about an hour, right?
Oh, at least, plus hours of research and preparation and all that. So it's like, if we charge an hourly rate, that is an exceptional deal people are getting.
Oh, yes.
And people don't want to know what my hourly rate is. They really don't, because I think they would.
They would.
They would make assumptions about my financial state that are not true.
Yes, that exactly.
All right, Alan. Let's talk about the next story on the news docket for this week. I love this story because it is so awesome. A Linux distro has hit the net, built by the U.S. Department of Defense, and also in conjunction with the Air Force Research Laboratory. And the funny thing about this is it's got a catchy name, Alan. It's called the Lightweight Portable Security Distribution. Right. And go ahead.
That's what the name is implying, that it's what it's specifically for is it's an application, right? It provides, it's a box you use, and when you have to do something in a secure environment, you launch this and do it.
Yeah, and
it's whether you're running it in a VM or if you're just deploying it on a bunch of boxes or whatever.
DistroWatch has a review of this sucker too, and it is it's funny. Here's the intention. It's meant so that U.S. Department of Defense officials can sit down at an unsecured computer and boot off a CD-ROM or USB stick, and they've put some protections in there to specifically make sure that there's no mark left on the machine. It doesn't mount the drive. It doesn't try to do any kind of install or anything like that. And they've customized the look of it. Screenshots over on the DistroWatch review if you can find it. They've customized the look of the thing. Looks like a Windows 2000 environment. But the idea behind it is that the department contractors and employees can take these things around and sit down in an otherwise unsecured machine and be given a trusted environment to operate within.
Yes, and similar thing when my friend was deployed in Afghanistan with the Canadian forces. They would have these terminals that they could use to, IM and email home and such. And they would boot, it would basically be a live CD of Linux, and they would use Pigeon or whatever to get on MSN and be able to talk with their friends for the little bit of time that they were given for that.
Oh, that's really cool. So
but it had to be a secure environment, right?
Yeah.
And so they used these live CDs because then you could just cycle it between each person and make sure that nothing was saved, nothing was stored, nothing got leaked.
If you're watching the video version of last year, I've got a screenshot up, and you can even see they've even re-implemented the start menu, only instead of a Windows logo, they put Tux in the corner. They even re-implemented the quick launch. This must be
Is that actually a KDE, or?
I would bet it's one of the more lightweight desktops that I'm not that familiar with. That already almost kind of has.
I guess, it is a live CD, isn't it?
It's based off a distro called ThinStation, originally developed to be like a thin client, real minimal OS. So they took that and they sort of branched from there. It includes like encryption support and all kinds of stuff. So pretty impressive, and it makes sense that this is the perfect kind of thing for open source software. I'm always a fan of government using these resources because it saves tax dollars. And if they make something really impressive here, they are re-releasing it, and we could, as a community, essentially incorporate some of those changes. So very cool.
Exactly. And it just means that, like we talked about on last week's episode of TechSnap, if they want to add some other feature to it in the future, they're not locked in. There's no vendor lock-in. They can just work with it. Yeah. Right? And it's not going to be magically incompatible with some other future system that some other branch of the military gets. Right? Yep. It's Linux. It works with everything. That's the whole point.
That's why it's a great solution for them, right there.
Exactly.
Now, Alan, this next story on the news docket is one that, even though you're not a big Linux person, kind of has you all riled up. And it's if go figure, Oracle. It seems like whenever Oracle's in the news, they're pissing somebody off. And this week they've got us all riled up because of their purchase of Ksplice.
Right. So Ksplice, in case you haven't heard of it, is a system that allows you to update your kernel without having to reboot. Basically, what it does is it takes a diff between the source code of the kernel you're running and the update, figures out what's different, and then at a code level, not at a code level, not at like the C level, but at the ELF level, looking at the actual binary.
Yeah, the linking.
And from that, it decides what functions have to change. So then it basically freezes all the applications on your system, updates the kernels in memory, and then lets those applications resume.
That's actually a pretty clever. I didn't realize. So it suspends running applications while it does it.
Yes.
And it in real time swaps out the code. That is cool.
Right. So where the function used to reside, it changes the old function first to make sure nobody's in the middle of the function. So it lets programs finish the function call they're on first.
Sure.
So that it can change it, because you can't change it when they're halfway through executing it. But then basically it rewrites the old one to just be a link to the new one, and then in memory somewhere else they have the new version, and the application just resumes executing on the updated kernel.
That's pretty cool. And Ksplice has been around since 2008. It's a pretty well-known piece of technology, and Oracle just acquired it.
The idea came in, I think, 2005. It was a couple of MIT students. One of them did it as their dissertation or whatever.
Just like, hey, this seems like it should be possible kind of a thing.
And then, so 4 MIT students started the company, and a couple of years ago, they got like $100,000 from MIT for having such a great idea. And
then they made Ksplice.
I guess it was earlier this week, they sold to Oracle for an undisclosed large sum of money, which is good for them. But importantly, first thing Oracle said is, yes, so now we're going to drop support in Ksplice for Red Hat, CentOS, SUSE Linux, and everything else. And now Oracle will be the only Linux that will allow you to update without rebooting. So Oracle Linux Premium Support subscription will provide you the only enterprise kernel that can update without rebooting.
Now, what's extra insulting to this is that the Oracle Linux is based off the source code of Red Hat Linux.
Yeah.
So I guess it's totally legal as far as by the book and all that, but it just seems so underhanded to take a product, take your flagship Linux product and base it off your direct competitor, repackage and sell it, and then buy a piece of technology and exclude them, even though really your technology applies to something that's based off of theirs.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Evil, right? This is evil.
It is. Luckily, the Ksplice project is open source, so the way I read it, you can do it yourself, or you can pay them to do it as a service, where they would do all the work for you. So Oracle's taking over the service, which has about 700 subscribers.
Oh, okay.
Those 700 subscribers count for 100,000 servers. So they have a lot of big subscribers.
Yeah.
And I think that's mostly what Oracle was after, is just support license money from all these big companies.
So is Ksplice screwed now, or can the open source community step up and do something about this?
By the sounds of it, by the sounds of the Slashdot article, it's likely that we'll end up with a fork.
A fork. Yep. That's what the chat room thinks, and I agree.
Yeah.
And this kind of you look back at the Sony online hackings and how there's there were signs that their Apache servers were woefully out of date, and there were signs that they were just missing security.
Years out of date.
Yeah, but really, it comes down to when it involves downtime, you have to negotiate that downtime with your superiors. They will make you do it at a time like 9 o'clock at night, or it's never a smooth procedure. It's never and the more bureaucracy, the more risk adverse they are, the more pressure there is to avoid doing these kinds of updates. There's like this inherent corporate pressure to skip downtime for security patches. So Ksplice was sort of like this you can still be online and stay protected. So it's a huge win for Linux servers, and I really hope we get something good forked out of this, because this is something that is a huge competitive advantage for a lot of shops that run Linux.
Yep.
So an interesting story development.
Interesting side note, the last security update that affected the FreeBSD kernel was November 10th of 2010. And it was something that could be unloaded and reloaded as a module, and it was for a pseudo file system that nobody used, so it didn't matter.
So you're saying FreeBSD hasn't had a security exploit patch for their kernel since 2010?
Yeah. The two vulnerabilities that have been announced so far this year in April and May were one was mountd for NFS, and you could apply the update without rebooting. And the other one was bind, so you just had to restart your DNS server.
There's been 2 security updates this year?
Yeah.
2?
That's it. Yeah.
Now, is that because they're not finding them? Is that just because there's hundreds and thousands more people on Linux finding them?
Not necessarily.
No? Okay. Then that just makes me cranky. I don't like to hear that, Alan. I don't want to hear that.
Well, no, part of the difference is anything that doesn't come with the OS isn't included. It's not a FreeBSD security update, right? If there's a vulnerability in Apache, that's an Apache update, right?
Yeah.
But basically, the kernel and the whole user land have had two vulnerabilities so far this year.
Right, I forgot. So, okay, yeah. And whereas in terms of like an Ubuntu desktop or something, Firefox is getting patched in there as well with that stuff.
Right. Now, you can do that, but there's a mailing list and a whole system on FreeBSD for tracking all of that, but that's not, it's a separate...
So is it the upstream project's responsibility to push out a patch? How does that work? Like, so if you say you needed to update Firefox.
The package system has a vulnerability feed and so on, and it works the same.
So they just have a dedicated maintainer.
Because it's an OS, not a distribution,
right?
It's kind of like Windows. When you install Windows, you get Windows and nothing else, right? No applications come with it.
Right.
Well, the same with FreeBSD. You get the kernel and the user land, and it doesn't come with Firefox. So because they didn't give you Firefox...
They're not going to fix Firefox.
Now, they have all the infrastructure in place for you to track and make sure your Firefox is up to date.
Interesting.
But it's a separate mailing list.
Huh. There you go. Well, does...
the fun part is most of the exploits that have been found are upstream projects, right? It was bind, which is from ISC,
right.
NFS v4, OpenSSL, bzip2, and then a couple of other ones were actually...
this is an interesting game because Microsoft, you will see when Microsoft on their... they have like a competitive advantages page for Windows Server versus Linux, and one of the things they call out is the number of patches for Linux. But if you drill into those patches, you do see they're talking about things like regular utilities and other things that aren't necessarily core operating system things, and Microsoft uses that to skew the numbers in their favor. But if you actually look at like the minimal install you'd have on a server, it turns out that Microsoft puts out just as many patches as everybody else. But when you start updating other people's projects as part of your operating system updates, they get to claim those numbers. So it's kind of the same thing. But all right, I want to move on. Just a really quick mention of to the Wine project. I haven't covered a Wine release in a while, and I felt like it was time because they've done something interesting. If you've had issues with your game or whatever app you might be using under Wine that uses audio, where the audio has been a little wonky, Wine 1.3.25 has been released with a rewritten audio support what is based on the Windows 7 architecture, which means that applications that are expected to operate with Windows 7 and use the Windows 7 sound system, which has changed from previous versions of Windows, will now, they'll when they query the sound system, they'll come back with, oh, you're running Windows 7. Okay, let me turn this on, let me turn that on. So very
That's
cool.
cool.
And if you watch these, every release the Wine Project does, I read through all of the release notes because I run Stow under Linux and I'm always following what's going on with Wine. The Wine Project always has a bunch of significant updates all of the time, but this one is specifically cool because it just shows how the Wine Project, which is a major issue that I was worried about, is not falling behind. See, I thought the Wine Project, one of the things is to me,
Actually,
seems
it's been accelerating a lot.
Yes.
Like I remember they were below version 1 for a long time.
years.
And it
For
was
a very long time.
It was only like it seems like it was only a very short time ago that they hit 1.0 and now they're at 1.3.
They're at 1.3 and they keep adding features. They're not stagnating.
Yes.
And I was worried that
Exactly.
the Wine Project, because they kind of have the catch-up game they have to play, I was worried that would throw them in a constant state of being too far behind. True, they're behind, but they're doing it at a pretty aggressive pace. They're adding. Go ahead.
They get the benefit that in the Windows platform, everything tries to maintain that backwards compatibility, right?
Yeah.
When you write an app for Windows 7, you still want it to work on Windows XP,
Well,
and so it's not, the APIs are fairly stable.
And the Windows app economy or whatever moves so slowly to adopt some of these new features that the Wine Project can be behind on some of these areas and not really take any penalty for it. Because
Right.
a lot of the other games out there, because of that backwards compatibility or whatever, still support what Wine supports. It's a neat system. I got the whole link, including there's a tons of bug fixes, and there's initial support for VB Script.
Oh,
So
why? But
yeah,
okay.
I don't know, but it's in there. So a link in the show notes if you want to read about that. The last story I thought we'd cover on the news docket is a fun one.
We missed one.
Oh, did we
other
miss one?
as well.
I'm sorry. Which one did we miss?
A good thing Oracle managed to do was a new
Oh,
version
right.
of VirtualBox
Yeah.
4.1.
Yeah, good. Yeah, absolutely. You're right about this, and it looks like a solid release. VirtualBox 4.1 came out on the 19th of July, and I'm pretty much on record now as a pro VirtualBox guy, having switched
For
from
sure.
an anti-VirtualBox guy. Check out one of the new features that I'm really excited about, though, is finally they're bringing in some decent virtual machine cloning into VirtualBox 4.1.
Nice.
Finally. Also, they're improving things like memory support and stuff like that. Another nicety? Arrow support for Windows 7 guests. I haven't tried this yet, but it's
But it means that you can get the basic functionality of the accelerated video GUI
Yeah.
in the virtual machine.
in the virtual
which-
machine. That
It can be it means you can get rid of that really ugly not arrow interface.
and my issue with it. There's no practical reason why you have to have Arrow. If you need to run a Windows VM, Windows Classic theme gets the job done just fine.
For sure.
But it's like this constant reminder that you're sort of
It's
running
not
as
real.
it's a second class implementation.
Yep.
Whereas this, man, this is sweet. They also if you use the remote, they have the ability to remote into VMs. They're going multi-monitor support. They said in one of their test setups they had remoted into a virtual machine and then extended that virtual machine across 6 monitors. So the virtual machine was supporting 6 monitors on a remote system. Very, very, with Arrow support and all of that. I mean, that is sounding like it's getting to the point where this is one of the most feature-rich virtualization products out there, and it's for free for now until Oracle screws that up.
Yeah.
So they worked on their Linux support quite a bit too, which is always awesome, and their OS 10 Lion support if you've just upgraded to Lion. And there you go.
1
I don't know.
terabyte of RAM. That'd be fun.
The thing I'm worried about is they're rolling VirtualBox now into what's called just like the Oracle has like this generic branding for Oracle VM products that are like Zen based and all of their different things, and they're rolling VirtualBox now into that overall product category, and now that's where the red lights are starting to go off for me.
Yeah.
Is they're kind of starting to treat it like they treat their other properties, and we'll see where that goes, right?
Yeah.
All right. Now, the last story is a fun one. And this whole episode, the rest of this episode is just about having fun. And that is a new release of Zero AD. Zero AD is a show we covered a while ago on our Linux Games Roundup episode. It's from Wildfire Games, and they're an international group of game developers. And Alpha 6 is out, and the new version has a lot of great features. But the thing that I wanted to sort of stand it out at me is there's new I guess they're calling them unit stances, and I've got a video in the show notes. You can check out what it means, but you can now, when you deploy your forces, I had this issue before, they kind of be a little dumb, and now you're going to be able to put them into predefined modes so that when bad guys enter the area, they know how to respond automatically. And it's network support. They've got Mac version, Windows version, Linux version, so you can download it in multiplayer with your non-Linux loving brethren, if you would associate with those kinds of people. I don't know. But you can. And it's just an awesome video game for Linux. And I wanted to give it a shout out since I was just talking about Wine. And the implication there is really Wine is still around because the gaming situation on Linux isn't so hot still. Yep. And I thought after covering that kind of news story, it would be appropriate to cover a news story about a game that is not only Linux-based but thriving on Linux. And that is
exactly.
0AD.
To give the people that are actually attempting to do Linux some press so that,
Exactly. Recognize what's going on out there.
So that more and more developers will see that, hey, there is a market at Linux, and let's make more games.
Yep, I totally agree. And I always, any way I can support them through the reach of the show, I will do that. And it's a game that I really would love to have like a, I don't know. I don't know how we would turn it into an episode, but I'd love to do an episode where we do some sort of live gameplay event with the live viewers and then somehow roll that into a Linux Action Show episode. We should do like maybe for some sort of like special event or something.
Yeah, like the Linux Action Show LAN party or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't know how you make a show out of that people would want to download and watch that would be any fun for them, but
hard. Yeah.
I'm working on it, and I think 0AD is going to be one of the games on the top of the list that we'll play. We've done it before, but it just didn't quite work so well, so I haven't really tried to repeat it, but it's on the back of my mind, and if anybody out there has any ideas, leave me a suggestion and leave a comment where you're watching this, how maybe we could do that, because I would love to do another gaming episode. There's a Jupiter Colony thread, like where people have been stashing games for the next time we do another game episode for a long time now, and every time I see that thread, I'm like, I've got to get to that episode. We've got to do it, but it's just not.
Actually,
I don't quite.
You might talk to Jeremy. He's been experimenting with different ways to incorporate gameplay into his show.
Yeah. Yep. The Morgue,
Maybe
and he's just made a big move on that in this last episode. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Yeah. The Morgue is the place to go.
Works.
Yeah, and I'll watch what he does with it and then figure it out from there. It's a good, that's not a bad idea. It might not be a bad way to go every now and then to do like a Linux game walkthrough.
Yeah,
because we're gonna do an XBMC
live
walkthrough
review or whatever.
Yeah, we're gonna do an Xbox Media Center walkthrough here in a few minutes. Why not in the future episode do like a Linux game walkthrough? Just hey, here's an introduction to this great game on Linux, and here's some of the things it'll do. I don't know if you out there in the audience would be interested in that. Let me know in the comments, and it's totally something I would love to do that, but I don't want to put out an episode that's boring to watch. So, yeah, do a little Quake Live. Any key says in the chat room. I like it. All right, Alan. Well, speaking of Xbox Media Center, let's jump into XBMC. It is time now to talk about Xbox Media Center, or actually what is now known as XBMC. I'll get to the history on that in just a minute. I thought we'd do a look at XBMC because I know a lot of you out there have asked me about this. And then next week, I will cover my personal media center that I use because it's a little different than XBMC, but not too different. And I've used XBMC for years on and off. And Alan, I wanted to ask you before we go, what's your home media entertainment solution?
Mine is just a basic FreeBSD install, based actually on the one that I did a BSD tips episode about way earlier in the year. But it's just FreeBSD with a KDE desktop, Firefox with Flash, and VLC. So I'm just playing media files.
So like when you want to watch TV on your TV from your computer, do you have like a mouse and keyboard? You just go over and double click on a file and launch it?
Yeah. So basically I have a spare computer on a cart connected to my 40-inch TV that I just turn it on, log into KDE on the keyboard, browse over my network to my file server, and double click on a video and it starts playing.
And that really for most people might be fine. Yeah. I think my wife would probably kill me if that was our solution. So I have been on the quest since I moved in with another person that has to use the entertainment system to find a semi-usable system. Right. And I've got a large range of needs. I want to be able to play.
I tried to come up with something. At one point, I was like, I made a little thing in my very weak Flash foo that would make big buttons. It would browse the directory and make big buttons for each
Clickable
episode.
for the TV kind of thing?
Yeah, and the idea was to make it work with my ATI Remote One, but it wasn't working out well, and honestly, I wish I had heard of XBMC back then.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I heard about XBMC back when I got a Hacksword original Xbox, the first Xbox that came out. I got a hacked one, and I put Xbox Media Center on there. And I was always looking for something that could play OGG files, MKV files, AVI files, everything that, you might want to throw at the box. And then, of course, the Xbox sort of, piddled out. It's a game console. But they moved on from the Xbox to the desktop realm, and they've made ports for every OS out there. And they're also what I've reviewed a while ago, and I'll talk about again later, is Boxy. Boxy is based off of XBMC. XBMC, though, has really turned into a full-fledged, mature product. And it has features that I have never used, but after going through this for this week's review, I am absolutely excited to try out. Like built-in repos to add in third-party applications, do all kinds of cool, crazy stuff. Out of the box, though, let's talk about that. If you want to put a Linux machine in your living room that will boot up and run a full-screen application media environment that anybody with a remote control could just sit down and operate, seriously, go take a look at XBMC. And I'll just give you the highlights because, again, this isn't my solution, but it's a great one. And I want to tell you guys about it because it's got to be the one I've had the most questions about. I'll give you a brief example of how an application like XBMC can kind of make your home media life a little better. So I'll go here to, they have a pretty nice interface, and you have lots of different themes you can choose from. I'm just using one of the stock ones. And I have added my home media shares, which are on a Samba server, to the XBMC software. Mm-hmm. So it is now aware of remote media. And the nice thing about that is sitting at my desktop in my office, I can just add a video file to my home network share and then go sit down on XBMC and it's there. I don't have to copy it over to my media machine, or I don't have to start a download or anything like that. I just go there and it's available. And XBMC has software where we'll go through and categorize and retrieve metadata information about the files in your library. So let's take an example here. I'm going to my TV shows. It'll pull up all of the TV shows that I have in my local library. Different themes will display them differently. And so you can play with, if you don't like the layout, you can load a different theme and it'll actually completely change the layout of how things look. But if you're watching the video version, check this out. As I scroll down and highlight the show 24, it brings up a still promotional image for 24. It also subtly changes the background to sort of fit in with the theme that I'm watching. It pulls up metadata information about the show. Like here is The Adventures of Superman. I can see that it was made in 1952, what genre it is. It gives me a little bit of information about, the show's history or whatever you might want to call it. And then I can go in here and I can, in this particular application, I don't get per episode individual metadata, but in some I might. I can go in here and I can select the one I want. It'll keep track of what I've watched, what I haven't watched, what resolution they're in, all these kinds of things. See there, just if you're watching the video version, just auto-populated on the right-hand column the resolution of all the different videos. So, the Acid Punk thinks I have the wrong theme. I happen to personally like the theme that I have selected, but I acknowledge there are better themes out there for Xbox Media Center. But the best thing about Xbox Media Center is you can go out and get a Jupiter Broadcasting app for it, right? I mean, that's got to be the best thing because it's about us, right? I don't have it on my demo machine because this is literally just a demo machine that I set up just to show you guys today. But the Xbox Media Center application, you can find a link in the show notes. It's over in the Jupiter Colony. It's a little out of date. It doesn't have TechSnap on there, Alan. I'm sorry about that. About that. Other than that, it's pretty good. It does have the all shows link in there, so you can basically get every show that we put in RSS. Xbox Media Center is a solution if you have content already established on your network. And if you have, like photos, music, or if you want to hook up a hard drive. It's not a solution if you want to capture live TV. That's more like something like Myth TV. That's a separate episode. That's something we'll cover later. This is established content on your network. And if you go in here, one of the things you'll notice too is you can add things like programs. And these programs allow you to do torrent downloads, or I think there's even some Usenet downloads. So you can sort of augment what your TV media system will do. And that's really nice if you just want to leave one computer on to sort of auto-manage your media collection for you. Yep. And they also have things in here like Gmail checkers, so you can get email notifications up while you're watching TV. I wouldn't necessarily want that, but you can. And they have things in here like ROM collections, so you can download game ROMs and essentially kind of turn your Xbox Media Center into a little arcade system as well for the ROMs that you might have.
I remember the first one I built, a media center like that I built for my parents, had one of those because we had a Coleco emulator, because that's what my parents used to have when I was a little kid.
Nice.
Coleco. We played like, Mr. Do and Ladybug and a bunch of other silly
Now, the other nice thing I'll see, Alan, this is an area where when you roll it yourself the way you have, you don't get the advantage of like the third-party ecosystem. People in here have turned on, like I can go into my settings, and one of the options that I have is network control over HTTP. And I can, there's like an Xbox Media Center remote protocol. I don't know if it's really what you call it, but there's a standard interface to control Xbox Media Center over the network. And so there's apps for Android, there's apps for iPhone, but there's also just a web UI you can use. And, when you can't find the remote, it's nice to have the option to fire up your smartphone and take control of your TV system.
Exactly.
Everybody every now and then can't find the remote. Or it's nice if your kids are watching TV and you can bring up the web interface and you can kind of check on what they're watching.
Yep.
That's what I'm thinking for down the road.
Or turn it down.
Or turn it down. Totally. So that's a really nice little plugin. It also supports universal plug and play. So if you have universal plug and play clients, it'll find it. Yep, exactly. So just a really, really slick system. And like I mentioned, I'm running it right here on a Linux box, accessing content on an SMB share. No problemo. It works excellent. And I would say if you just need straightforward network streaming, you want to maybe do slideshows when you have guests over, you want to play music, things like that, you've really got to check this app out. The reason why I'm prefacing it like that is because I guess I kind of feel like this is the pirate's solution. This seems like a system designed to support people who download their content. And
not necessarily. We're just the same if it was people that bought the TV shows on DVDs and loaded them onto their NAS.
Yep. If people actually did that it would also work for them.
I know people that do that, but
I'm just thinking the way this thing. So the metadata scraper, it'll scan your whole library and then it'll go out and like I was showing on the video version here, The Adventures of Superman, and it goes out and gets the metadata for that. The way it does that
it has a very fancy regular expression that interprets the name of the pirated TV episodes to figure out all the metadata.
Exactly. It knows how to read the nomenclature of pirated files to get the correct metadata. So they've built it with that in mind. That said, like Alan said, you can still use it for completely legitimate purposes. This is not your live TV. There's some presidential debate and I want to turn on Xbox Media Center and watch it. That's not this. That's not what this is. But this is very much a stored media playback system. The other thing,
those are always posted so you can pirate them.
Well, that's
presidential debates if you want to watch them.
Pretty much anything on TV is always posted at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of the reason why I'm kind of hesitant to say this is the perfect solution is because one of the things I've struggled with. Yeah, one of the things I've struggled with in doing these reviews is I can't really come and say this is the perfect solution for you because you might need live TV support. If you don't, Xbox Media Center is something worth looking at. You can customize the hell out of it. You can really set this thing up nice. And you can even do things, you can extend some of its basic functionality beyond what it comes with, maybe even to the point of live TV through some of the plug-in systems they have. But it's definitely a great piece of open source software, and it's also platform agnostic. I happen to only have run it on Linux. I've never ran it on Windows or Mac OS X before, but I know it works on those platforms just as well. And so it's something to definitely check out. XBMC.org, a link in the show notes. I'd like to hear what you do, though, for your Linux home media entertainment system. This is sort of my opening salvo in this in our series of covering this, because I know this is going to be the elephant in the room, that if I don't talk about XBMC every single episode we do, people will say, well, what about XBMC? So there it is. We've covered XBMC. It's a great solution. It's not my solution. What's your solution? I'd love it if you would leave a comment over on the show page. That way I can go there and read them all and know what they're all applicable to. So if you go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com and find Season 17, Episode 9, and leave a comment on what you do for your Linux Media Center system, I want to start collecting all of those and sort of do like a open source version of a segment on what other people out there in Linux are doing, because I think with the wide range of types of hardwares and receivers and TVs, this is such a massive topic that I kind of need to get some of the people out there in the last army to give me some info on what they do. Yep. Now, I think that's just about everything I want to cover in Xbox Media Center. Alan, I wanted to make a challenge to you. If you get around to building an Xbox Media Center system on a FreeBSD box, I want you to come back on the show and tell us about it, okay?
For sure.
Because I think before we even started this episode, didn't even know you could do that on FreeBSD. My understanding was XBMC didn't run on FreeBSD.
It didn't used to, but apparently at the beginning of the year, they created a FreeBSD port of it. And so over the last couple of months, they've been working on it. And it's in the port tree now. I included the link in the show notes for that. And cool. Yes, I'm seriously considering giving that a try just to see what it looks like.
Yeah, and if you out there in the audience, give it a try. Let us know, because like Darth Penguin in the chat room says, I'm crowdsourcing this one because it's such a massive, major range of topics that I want to hear what you guys are doing.
You can have all the different setups, hardware, and requirements that other people do.
Right, exactly. Totally. All right, Alan. Well, you know what? That just about brings us to the end of this week's episode. Yep. Now, next week, we'll pick this back up. I think the B-Man should be back if everything goes as planned. And we'll hopefully work in some of your ideas and thoughts. You can also email, if you want, chris@jupiterbroadcasting.com or linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com if you want to email those suggestions. Or, even better, send them to me on Twitter. And if I get some really good ones, I'll retweet them. I'm Chris LAS on Twitter. And Alan, you're Alan Jude on Twitter, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
So if you want to give Alan some tips for Xbox Media Center on PC or on FreeBSD, hit him up at Alan Jude on Twitter. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, and we'll see you right back here next week. All right, here we go. It's the news in 3, 2...